Welcome to the Happier Life Project, the official podcast from the award-winning mental health and wellness app, My Possible Self. Hosted by broadcaster and journalist Gabby Sanderson.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of our senses with none other than Professor Charles Spence, who is a world-famous experimental psychologist with a specialisation in neuroscience-inspired multisensory design. He's also founder of the Crossmodal Research Laboratory at Oxford University. Charles has spent decades working with some of the biggest global brands, celebrity chefs, airlines, and even chocolatiers to understand how our senses interact and how they shape our everyday experiences. In this episode, we're going to explore how people see, hear, touch, taste, and to smell the world around them, and the surprising ways our senses influence each other. Charles explains how companies and brands deliberately target our senses for their own agendas. He also talks about why we tend to eat more when the TV is on or when we're surrounded by friends, and why he believes that while many people talk about sensory overload, the real issue is more of a sensory imbalance, as technology overstimulates some senses while leaving others behind. We also talk about why we are all so touch hungry in today's society, what we can do about it, and how much better we would feel if we gave all of our senses the attention they deserve. Plus, Charles highlights the ripple effect of being more mindful about how our own sensory choices, such as playing music loudly or eating strong-smelling food on public transport, can impact the sensory experience of others. Be prepared in this chat to see the world in a whole new way, as Professor Charles Spence helps us unlock the power of our senses. And he really drives home the message of how small changes in how we engage with our senses can make life not only happier, but richer and more fulfilling. Ready to find a healthier, happier you? Let's dive in. Welcome, Professor Charles Spence, to the Happier Life Project. It's a real pleasure to have you all the way from Colombia currently. So you're a professor of experimental psychology at Oxford and lead the Crossmodal Research Lab. I'd love, in your own words, if you could kind of describe what you do for our listeners.
So my name is Professor Charles Spence, head of the Crossmodal Research Laboratory at the University of Oxford, where I've been for 27 years now and counting. And my lab looks at the human senses, how people see, hear, touch, taste, and smell the world around them. And in particular, we think a lot about how the senses interact one with another. So how what you see can change what you smell changes what you feel changes what you taste. All the senses communicating all the time, and we try and take the emerging insights around these sort of sensory interactions to the design of real-world experiences that hopefully may help to make people happier, healthier, more productive, or whatever else it is that they're after.
When you are looking at the senses, like usually if I think about like mindfulness exercises, and there's one in particular where you've got to like think of something you can smell, think of something you can touch, but they are in isolation. Whereas what you do more of is when they interact.
And sometimes that, even if you think what you're doing is just focusing on one sense, there may be lots of the other ones are actually working in the background. So I think there's some paper on mindful eating a raisin.
Yes.
And the benefits of that. So you might think, well, that's just targeting taste. But in fact, you'll have seen the raisin first.
Yeah.
You may hear yourself chewing it. There'll be the smell, the aroma, of sort of the right fruit and the sweetness to taste. So in fact, that what seems like a single sensory act is actually engaging the other ones.
Yeah.
But our brain tends to kind of integrate all those different sensory inputs without our awareness. So it feels to us like we are just hearing or just tasting or just feeling.
Yeah. I'm smiling because I'm thinking in the first series, we had Alistair Campbell on as a guest. He said that was his favorite mindfulness exercise to do.
Well.
There you go. You've worked with some very high profile clients and major brands, global airlines, celebrity chefs. And I don't think we, the kind of normal consumer, necessarily think so much about the kind of sensory design of what some of these companies are considering. And I'd love to talk a little bit about a couple of examples of some of your work, because it's so interesting. If we talk about British Airways, they brought you in to do this sonic seasoning. And again, I couldn't help but smile because plain food is notoriously known for being not so pleasant. Mm-hmm. And I guess you were trying to help shift opinions on that a little bit.
Yep. Or improve the experience of airline food, which, as you say, no one has a good word to say about.
Yeah.
And this was back in, I guess, 2013 now. And we were doing work on the time, on the one hand, just seeing how there are a quarter of all airline passengers who will only ever order a Bloody Mary or tomato juice in the air, but never order one on the ground.
Did they say why?
But people don't realize they're doing it. Then when you point it out, when you do surveys of, you find that there are these quarter of flyers who only have the Bloody Mary or tomato juice in the air. And you think that's got to have an explanation. If you like a Bloody Mary, you like it wherever you are, don't you? But no, people only order it up in the air. And our idea was that maybe this has to do with the noise of the engines. Because in an airplane, it's sort of 80 to 85 decibels of engine noise, depending on where you're sitting in the plane. So quite a loud background noise. And we predicted that suppresses people's ability to taste sweet and salty, but maybe enhances their ability to taste umami, the mysterious fifth taste of proteinaceous taste of tomatoes, Worcester sauce in your Bloody Mary, right. Parmesan cheese and mushrooms and so on. And the following year, some researchers in Cornell actually demonstrated in the lab that, yes, indeed, if you play airplane noise to people, it does suppress sweet by about 20%, salty by about 20%. And hence that's partly why food tastes bad in the air. But you have to add so much more sugar and salt to get the same taste experience at altitude that you would have on the ground. And so with that insight in mind, that the airplane noise was kind of enhancing the taste of umami, we worked with British Airways to think about how you could improve the experience, knowing how the senses connect, knowing how sound affects taste in this case, kind of multisensory interaction. And for that, so I had the idea that if you put noise-cancelling headphones on when you're in the air, then that's already going to damp down the engine noise in particular. So that will make food taste better for a start. And then once you've done that, once you put the noise-cancelling headphones on to make the food taste better, to bring out more of the salt and the sweet taste, then could you also think about which music you might be listening to over your noise-cancelling headphones.
Right.
And there... we have a whole line of research on what we call sonic seasoning, which is the use of music and soundscapes to enhance particular tastes and flavors. So just like you might add the salt shaker or the pepper grinder to dial up saltiness or pungency in a dish, we can use music to do the same thing. Particular kinds of music to bring out sourness, sweetness, salty, umami, creamy, spicy, you name it. And so we had some recommendations for the front end of the plane, should we say, rather than the economy passengers who had the noise-cancelling headphones in their seats, who could then choose their meal for the long-haul flights and then choose the track in the in-seat sort of sound system in order to match the taste of the food that they were eating.
Wow. So is this like when you worked with Heston?
Sound of the Sea?
Exactly. Yeah. Is it that kind of soundscapes? Like it's not actual a genre of music?
Yeah. No. So in this case, it was a real music. So just pre-recorded music. So we had things like, I think the Proclaimers, remember, sort of Scottish pop group to go with the look fin salmon or something. And then we had some Louis Armstrong to bring out the sort of bitterness of a dark chocolate tart dessert that was being served. So in this case, it was all actual tracks you could hear. Whereas with Heston, it was the sort of sounds of the sea, so more nature soundscapes that were doing the work.
Wow.
Yeah, the one thing came out of the other, because in a way, when we did the Sound of the Sea experiment for the first time in Oxford back in 2007, Heston came up with a band full of oysters and some bacon and egg ice cream that was on the menu at the time at the Fat Duck. And then we just gave the audience the oysters and the bacon and egg ice cream, either while listening to sounds of the sea for the oyster, or farmyard chickens and sizzling bacon sounds for the bacon and egg ice cream. And bizarre though it was.
No vegetarians then.
When it's the world's top chef, maybe there aren't so many vegetarians around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that sort of came from them then showing that we could enhance the tastiness of and enjoyment of the oyster with the sounds of the sea, that led into what the Fat Duck brought onto the menu. When diners go there for their once-in-a-lifetime meal, then the idea is to kind of, I think, illustrate the senses and the power they have over us. So the soundscape then comes to the diner with a plate that looks like the seashore with sashimi, sand, foam, seaweed, and you get a conch shell with some earbuds, and you put the earbuds in, and then you hear the waves crashing on the beach and the sound of the seagulls overhead. So then it's a very sort of conscious act. You know you are putting these earbuds in, and then you hear something that you wouldn't expect to hear in a restaurant in Slough, and then it changes the experience for many people, brings lots of people to tears, but it's sort of making the diner aware of the senses and how they affect taste. Whereas some of these other companies who might use some of the same insights, maybe they've got no particular desire for you, the customer, to know what's going on, why you do the things you do. And one of my favorite older examples is just from a British supermarket in Leicester. And they have French and German wine on the shelves in the supermarket, a wine aisle, and they just change whether it's French accordion music or German umpa kind of beer keller music day by day, week by week. And they show that most people buy French wine when French music is playing. Most people buy German wine when German music's playing in the supermarket. That's amazing enough to show how sound completely changes our purchasing behavior. But then when you ask people when they come away from the till, why did you buy French wine today? Virtually no one says it was the music that did it. They all say, well, I was going to make a beef bourguignon or something, so it had to be a French wine. So our senses are affecting us all the time, and most of the time we have no awareness of it.
Obviously. Yeah.
And maybe that's what some of the companies do. They just use the insights for their nefarious ends or for their positive ends. A bit of
manipulation going on there.
Yeah. Whereas with the chefs, it's very much foregrounding this sort of sensploration or sensorium type things where you sort of show people how the senses are connected in the strange ways that one sense affects another. And you come out from the meal, not just sated, but also kind of maybe intrigued about the senses and what uses they could have, which could be, on the one hand, maybe for the bad ends from some of these global companies, perhaps. But on the other hand, we could all use the power of our senses in order to enhance our own experience once we recognize what our senses do to and potentially for us.
Yeah, well, you already gave us a few really good, I guess, food hacks just now, just listening to you talk, because I'm thinking if somebody's maybe wanting to improve their diet, or they've got a bit of a sweet tooth, or maybe they do have too much salt, then get the sound of an aeroplane engine going and it might pull the craving a little bit.
Yeah. And we find, we've just been doing some research recently with a Iranian student who's been visiting, and just looking, I'm very interested in how, from the Sound of the Sea dish onwards, which is kind of a way of bringing nature into the restaurant. When I look around the world of fancy, the world's best restaurants and all the experiential dishes and things they're doing, whenever they try and create an atmosphere in their restaurants, it's nearly always nature in some way, shape or form that they try to create. The seashore, that smell of the sea, the smell of the forest after it's rained, sort of petrichor smell, the sounds of birds and nature. And I sort of got thinking, well, why are so many chefs, of all the things that they could try and introduce into the restaurants, all trying to introduce nature stimuli? Maybe it triggers the nature effect. And then also perhaps it's congruent with the food. And we've just been working with this Iranian student to test this, looking at people's choice behavior online for shopping and Amazon type things and for food purchasing. And we find if you play the sounds of nature in the background, on the website, people are significantly more likely to make more sustainable, healthier choices than if you're having pop music or I don't know, whatever else is playing.
I don't know where I listened to this. It was on a podcast. When I was doing my research on you, and you were saying that you tend to eat more as well if you're with another person. Was one of your findings. As much as I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 35%. You eat 35% more if there's two of you, and then it's 70% more.
It sort of goes up as greater the number of people at the table. The consumption goes up with each extra person.
Wow. Is that because we're being a bit mindless? We're more focused on the conversation than what we're consuming?
Yep. So it could be that probably for most of us, we're not in a good mood if we're eating by ourselves. So dining is mostly sort of commensal activity to be shared and social activity at heart. And so maybe if you're in a better mood when you're dining with other people, and if you're in a better mood, food tastes better, so you consume more. It might be also that you're distracted by the conversation, who you're with. And we know that, one of the things that came out of my previous book, Gastrophysics, was those who wanted to eat less should just turn off the TV or their technology at mealtimes, because that was one of the strongest factors predicting how much more you eat with the TV on, depending on the TV show, say, or with your mobile device. And simply by removing that, by avoiding the TV dinner, as it were, you bring the mind back to what you're eating. My sense was that our brains, how do we decide when to stop eating? It's probably by the number of sensations we've had. And hence anything you can do to draw people's attention to the sensations of eating, the textures, the taste, the smells, the mouthfeel, then they'll be fuller with less. But anything that distracts you from the meal, like your mobile device, like conversation at the table, like a TV show, then your attention's somewhere else. So your brain doesn't kind of register all the stuff that's going in, and hence you end up consuming more than you otherwise would.
Really interesting. I think having a TV dinner gets a really bad rep, but then I think for some people it also does bring a lot of pleasure, especially if it's like a treat thing you do at the weekend. But I know there is a lot to be said for being more mindful and not distracted when you eat. So, well, we've already talked about how potentially companies and brands could manipulate our senses without us knowing. But what if we wanted to manipulate our senses a little bit? If we look at it through the lens of mental health and wellness and feeling happier? Well, first of all, do you think, in your opinion, are there like any of the senses that we tend to neglect more than others?
So lots of people talk about sort of sensory overload in society today, and that's being that's a stressor. There's too much information, too much noise, too much stuff going on. But I think it's more of a sensory imbalance, I like to say, in that I think the sort of digital technology is very good at stimulating our eyes and our ears, but does a terrible job at stimulating any of our other senses. And as technology has evolved, then that means we are getting overloaded with audio-visual information, our higher rational senses. But you can't find many people who are saying I'm getting too much touch or too many smells, or too many tastes.
Actually,
touch hungry indeed. Yeah. And so I think this makes it seem like a sensory imbalance, that we're overstimulating our higher rational senses of hearing and vision because of what technology can deliver, and we're sort of neglecting our more emotional senses of touch, taste, and smell, and that likely has sort of negative consequences. And hence anything you can do to rebalance the sensory inputs. Then through even it can be things through sort of a massage and aromatherapy would be one way into stimulating some smell and touch in sort of a positive way. The work of Tiffany Field, she kind of coined the term touch hunger, and she has hundreds of studies demonstrating just how much better, more productive, happier people are if their skin is the biggest sense is stimulated through massage. And this is, we are touch hungry in our biggest sense. If we're not stimulating it, what do we miss? What do we lose? It's a very powerful case that, it is beneficial to engage touch. If you can do it in a multisensory way by also engaging, say, scent through aromatherapy, massage, then you're stimulating two of our more emotional senses.
Put some calming music on.
Yeah.
Do you think self-touch is as good as like giving somebody a hug or a reassuring touch on the arm or something, that's just kind of, I think that it has so many health benefits. But I wonder if you're like somebody that lives on your own.
Yep.
Can you apply all this to yourself, like massage your shoulders, feet, whatever?
I think it can't harm. I'm not sure that it's as good as interpersonal touch.
Yeah.
So now one of the things Tiffany Field's been talking about the benefits of touch for decades now, since the 70s or 60s, maybe even, but we never knew quite what the mechanism was. Why should touching the skin make you feel better, relax you?
Do for babies, don't you?
Yeah, now.
Yeah.
And in fact, where I am now in Colombia, then the whole idea of kangaroo care emerged from Colombia.
Oh.
So there's a lot of interest here in sort of touch for preterm babies. Tiffany Field has this thing of, these preterm babies who are just put in an incubator and they're starved of touch for the first months of life. And now that's starting to change as we realize the power of touch and that those preterm infants who are touched, however it's done, end up putting on more weight, becoming healthier as a result.
Yeah.
Sadly, my poor old wife missed it because she was born in '69 as I was. And in those days, no one thought about touch. And she came out at, I don't know, 5 months or something. And she was put in an incubator and never touched. And she's only about half the size of her sisters.
Wow.
But now we know the sort of mechanism that there are these pleasure receptors in the skin. Everywhere apart from the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, whether you have hair or not, it's called hairy skin. And these pleasure receptors like being stroked at about 5 to 10 centimeters a second by warm touch, which is probably why if you have like, I don't know, maybe a massage chair might not do it, or if you touch an inanimate object, that probably won't have the right temperature and it probably won't move at the right speed over your body, whereas interpersonal touch tends to be optimized for that kind of stimulation of the hairy skin. Supposedly maybe to help remove nits back in the day from our conspecifics. And hence, if we notice these C-tactile afferents, they're called the receptors that like the slow and release the endorphins or whatever when you're stroked the right way. Presumably you could do that to yourself, stroke at the right speed if you knew, but maybe it's a bit like tickling, I think. It's very hard to tickle yourself because your brain kind of predicts what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I worry that, in fact, self-touch might be like tickling and it just doesn't work on yourself quite the same way as it does on others. I mean, it's just a hypothesis. But as I say, probably can't help. I mean, it's partly about the speed and the temperature of the touch is important. But I think it's also if someone's touching you, that implies there's another person, another entity close enough that's sort of caring. So I can't help but wondering how much of the beneficial effects of interpersonal touch or massage is from our brain sort of realizing there's somebody else out there who cares. And it's that sort of social aspect. If you're close enough to touch, then you're close enough to smell, and we're not alone.
Yeah. I mean, you already touched upon it. I was going to ask you about...
As it were.
Yeah, exactly. Technology and obviously so many benefits, but like, I suppose, again, when it comes to our senses and like you said, it's focused on audio and visual and then neglecting the others. So I suppose this all weaves into as well, there's a huge loneliness epidemic. And a big factor of that is because we're moving so much to the digital space, and COVID had a lot to answer for in this respect. So what's the answer then for more balance? Being more aware of it, like you said, and then sort of seeking out the places where we're not nurturing certain senses.
Yeah. I don't have a phone, never had a phone. Get rid of your phone. Ever. That'd be one of the answers, I think. I'm not sure anyone will take me up on it, but I can guarantee it'd probably be good for them if they did.
Yeah.
A digital detox, is that what they call it?
Yes.
So that's the one extreme, you might say. And the other is, I think, what came out of the sense hacking book for me was just how much research has emerged over the last decade or two since my previous foray into this world of the senses and well-being, of connection to nature. And that can be through the sounds of birds and water. It can be through the sights of green or the blues of water, or it can be the smells of plants, or touching plants or tasting them. But however you sort of reconnect to nature, whether it's real nature or whether it's just like a screensaver or a plastic plant, all of them seem to have this remarkably beneficial effect on mood, on well-being, on recovering our attentional resources. I sort of feel like myself out here. I'm in Colombia and lucky to have a little sort of house with a big garden in the cloud forest. And so every day I'd go for an hour just around the garden and smelling the plants, seeing the colours, listening to the water, the waterfalls and the birds and the trees. And then you can sort of feel the restorative power of that. If you ask people, and this has been done, do you think you'd feel better if you went out for the day to the countryside or something, or to nature? Then most people would say, yeah, probably yes. But if you ask people, well, how much better would you feel? That's what we all underestimate. And the idea is that even though we know that getting out into nature is good for us, if none of us actually realize how much better we actually do feel, then few of us are minded to take the steps or sort of reconnect us with nature. And so whatever we can do to draw people's attention to that, the power of nature, and think about how you do it. Whether maybe you're not fortunate enough to have a nice big garden outside your window, outside over here, but then is it just sort of smelling a floral scent? Will that do it? Is it just going around the local park, or listening to the birds and being mindful of the nature that surrounds us in whatever form it takes?
And like what you said about, again, that sort of sense hacking or manipulation or whatever, that you could maybe incorporate a little bit of that at home. Like, I'm just getting into plants now. And I've noticed, I've been watching on YouTube how to grow more basil from my own basil or whatever, and getting my hands in the soil and just doing it. It's been absolutely incredible, where I used to like roll my eyes when my mum was in the garden, and now I find myself going the same way.
They're very therapeutic and pleasurable, surprisingly pleasurable to grow your own herbs when they live.
When they live, yeah, totally. But I'm thinking, like you said, is there kind of some candles that might smell of the woodland or whatever, where we get, okay, we haven't got time to go to our nearest forest for the day.
Or even just, having a bit of nature to touch, so a bit of tree bark.
Oh, yeah.
On your desk, or like I do, or sort of a pebble or a cone, and just have that there, through to just kind of the olfactory reset of some pleasant plant aromas. Could be herbs, could be spices, could be flowers, or just the floral scents, and just having those as kind of an olfactory reset in your day. Because one of the other things that came out of the research is, especially during COVID, many people were working from home, and then you may have, a whole day of Zoom meetings or something very stressful. Then your brain kind of, when you smell the smell of where you've been stressed, it makes you stressed again. Like when you go to the dentist and you smell the eugenol, the clove scent, suddenly you're very tense. But you learn that when I smell that smell of cloves, you get the pain comes. So I think a weaker version of that happens in the home. If you're having all these Zoom meetings, then the smell of our own home that none of us really think about nor are aware of, our brain picks up and it associates that smell of your home with those stressful Zoom meetings, and hence it can be hard to break out. And hence, simply by introducing a different smell, whatever it is, into your home environment, that can sort of help you reset, I think.
Wow.
In the same way that, for the dentist surgeries, what they should, and the hospitals, what they should really be doing is sort of changing their smell every few months, so that when people arrive, they don't get as stressed, which we know they do from the smell of the dentist surgery or hospital.
Yeah. Wow. So like people who are struggling with their mental health, and this is something like we really should take seriously and look into, working with all of our senses. It seems, hearing you talk, like such common sense, but like I think overlooked by most.
I think that's what I say. It's so fundamental. The real problem is we don't realize how much better we would feel, because if we did, we do something about it, and that's the real sort of gap for us. But we did a study with commuters on Southwest trains back in February, I think it was now. And we had people doing a commute, which can be very stressful, on the trains for an hour around London. And then we had them either listening to their favorite podcast, nothing against podcasts, or a special nature soundscape with water and a bird song and such like, or just sitting there in silence, doing each one for 15 minutes and just walking up and down the train carriage as people were taking part. You could see how much happier they were with the nature soundscapes. Their eyes closed, kind of smiling peacefully. And even compared to the podcast or anything else, this was all backed up by the questionnaires about how people's mood was before, during, and after the experience of commuting. But that really backed it up for me. Just the transformative power that nature can have. And I say it can be through any one of our senses, in fact, but probably the more, the better.
Yeah.
I do worry, if you're out in nature, but you've got your headphones on listening to some doom metal or something, well, I'm seeing nature, but I'm not hearing it. Does that still work? Or are all the beneficial effects of nature cancelled out because of what's going on in the other senses? I suspect it's probably cancelled out, and certainly if there are studies of North American nature parks like the Grand Canyon, which are very beautiful and awe-inspiring visually. But the only problem is that there are all the helicopters with the luxury tourists overhead, so lots of anthropocenic noise. And the research suggests it's that noise that actually ruins all the benefit you could have accrued from being in that place.
Yeah, I went on a hike on Sunday. It was an absolutely stunning location, but for part of it, we had to walk close enough to the road that there was like a load of motorbikes, really aggressive, and destroyed everything for that part of the hike. Yeah, so I totally see how that would be a problem, and probably something that unfortunately is getting worse is to find places of actual peace and tranquility, you know.
And even here in the middle of the cloud forest, in fact, we're only 40 miles from the airport as the crow flies. So actually you can hear the aeroplanes coming in. Yeah. And again, that's Anthropocene noise that's bad for us. And anyone who lives near an airport, their waistline will be larger, suffer from less good health, probably from sleep problems. So that's really negative. Not much we can do about it, except try and have more water features, so more falling waterfalls, because that has a kind of like white noise quality that sort of suppresses. It's good for us, and it's good for us in a different way from bird song. Birds and water seem to have complementary effects on well-being, but the good thing about the sort of water sounds is that they will mask out somewhat the aeroplane noise in much the way that a number of open plan offices. They've been doing research in Scandinavia where there are a lot of open plan offices where you can always get distracted by everyone else's noise and their calls. And there they've been playing water falling sounds as a kind of backdrop to give you a bit more privacy,
right,
and less distraction.
Is that then maybe a suggestion for somebody that does struggle to sleep because of noisy neighbours or traffic on the road or whatever? Like, I'd love to sleep with my window open, but the trash truck comes at 1 o'clock in the morning, and then there's drunk people going past, and
drunk students. No. So I used to, when I was in a noisy place, then go to sleep with my radio mistuned, so you just had white noise, and that sort of works. And then bizarrely, when you wake up the next morning, you thought, I'm sure I went to bed with radio on mistuned, and I can't hear anything. And then about 10 seconds later, suddenly your brain tunes in and you hear it again.
Oh, wow.
Very bizarre phenomenon. So that's one way of doing it, but maybe nicer is to have the some of those sort of nature soundscapes, like the ones we're using on Southwest trains that can help to block out the noise with some sort of pleasant, and quite which one works for whom, I guess, might be some individual differences or preferences. So anything that can help.
Yeah. Do you have a personal sensory ritual that you particularly turn to for a bit of calm and clarity, knowing what you know?
I'm here in Columbia. And here in Columbia, then it is the sort of daily afternoon walk around the garden that does it. Sort of the mindful of all the sensations that one comes across, and that's great. When I'm not, then it's normally something like water related, so either a bath in the morning or a swim in the afternoon, as sort of I guess that's sort of stimulating the sense of touch in a way, not with the interpersonal touch, not with the see tactile pleasure receptors, but nevertheless sort of calming and beneficial, and sort of maybe very definitely me time, very definitely distracted from all technology, through to just, I guess, a sort of pleasure of cooking, I suppose, as well. So that's kind of a very sort of sensory activity. It requires you to be sort of there in the act of doing it and making, but also not there so much that you can't think about other stuff. So it's not like just doing nothing, which would be kind of boring. It's that kind of low requirement activity of cooking that's is also, I think, therapeutic and fun.
A lot of this is getting back to basic stuff, isn't it? Just being a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thinking about probably the environments in which we evolved, we have a natural affinity for, and that plays out, back in the 1970s, I think it was. John Bergman, was it, who had the TV show on vision and seeing and art, and forget the art of seeing or something it's called, very famous in its day. And he says, why is it that all calendars, when we used to have calendars on the wall, always have pictures of sort of blue and green of nature. Well, this is because it goes back to our evolutionary ancestors, and a bit of green would be a bit of shade and blue would be water, and this is what we needed for survival, and that's why we like it so much. The most striking things for me from doing the research for the sense hacking book was this study from Justin colleagues in the States, and they had just, I guess, online gone around all 51 states of the US of A, from the very hottest in Texas and to the coldest in Alaska, and just asked people to report in what temperature they set their air conditioning at and what humidity levels. And they found that regardless of the state, regardless of the ambient temperature, everyone was setting their thermostat and humidity to exactly the same level.
What was it? Can you remember?
The exact numbers I can't
At the book.
remember who it was. Yeah, read the book and it's in there somewhere. But what was amazing was that when they said, okay, let's now correlate the temperature and humidity that people set for their own homes with the geographical norms, what happens in different parts. Is it trying to imitate or mimic the temperature and the conditions of Alaska or Portugal or the UK? And no, and the one climate zone that was most closely matched with what people chose for themselves was actually the Ethiopian highlands of Africa, where he thought humans have evolved. So again, it's sort of getting you back to, none of us think like that, but when you analyze it, the simplest explanation is that, in fact, we are searching out, we are creating for ourselves that environment that goes back millions of years without realizing it. And so the more we're aware of these sort of evolutionary connections or sensory preferences, then perhaps that's helps us to choose and design and pick the environments that will have the most beneficial effect. And for me, ultimately, it's this thing of none of us believe, I don't think, that the environment has as much impact on us than the evidence shows that it does. We all think we can taste how things really taste, and that the wine tastes, that we wouldn't be fooled by having the sun on our back or being in Portugal on the beach or in the forest. And yet the research shows we are all affected by these sensory cues, by what we're hearing, seeing, smelling, touching, feeling. But we have to figure out a way to become aware of that, because it doesn't feel like that to us. And it's only when you recognize the power of the senses, when your attention is drawn to it, then you think, okay, maybe I'll do things differently now. Maybe I will go for a walk in nature because I felt the power for myself rather than just being told it by somebody else and not really believing it's true. And I'm not quite sure how you get over that sort of gap.
Well, you've started as an entry point for people listening to this podcast today.
Little by little.
Little by little. Thank you so much for today. I'm definitely going to apply some of this stuff to myself, even like serving dark chocolate. Maybe when I've got friends around, I'll put a bit of Louis Armstrong on. Yeah. Thank you again, Charles. Really fascinating stuff. Hello friends, it's Gabby back with you. If you are suffering with your mental health, there is a crisis button on the My Possible Self app, which will signpost you to the correct information for immediate expert advice. Those of you who are listening on one of the podcast platforms, the My Possible Self app is completely free to download. You can access all of the content, so you don't need to worry about it costing you anything. If you found this episode helpful, please do subscribe and leave a review and share it with your friends. And to find and follow us on social media, we are most active on Instagram, and you can find us at My Possible Self. And I've been at Radio Gabby. Until the next one, do take care. Bye for now.